You have no idea what is hiding right now beneath your feet. Underground cities, buried treasures, ancient civilizations hidden from the world, and even sports cars buried in the backyard of an ordinary house. In this extended episode, the craziest discoveries of recent years. From a mammoth with a complete skeleton to a secret city under Antarctica that could change the entire history of humanity. This is the TopFacts channel, and what you are about to see will truly shock you. Spend this hour with maximum interest and enjoy watching. James Bristle was digging on his soybean field in southern Michigan when his excavator struck a strange metallic structure covered in dirt. When he and his friend arrived, they realized it was not a fence at all, but part of the pelvis of an ancient woolly mammoth that had lived about 15,000 years ago. A team of paleontologists from the University of Michigan, using an excavator, managed to extract roughly 20% of the mammoth skeleton, including the skull, 2 tusks, several vertebrae, ribs, and a shoulder blade. Researchers now suspect that people may have been nearby, perhaps butchering the mammoth and storing its meat for the future. Near the remains, 3 stones the size of basketballs were found. They could have served as anchors to hold the mammoth carcass in a pond. Mammoths and mastodons, elephant-like creatures, roamed North America until they disappeared about 11,700 years ago. About 300 mastodons and 30 mammoths have already been found in Michigan, but the mammoth remains discovered in Bristle's field are much more complete than any previous finds. Historical records claim that the tomb of Huang is the richest burial in history. It is said that entire palaces filled with countless treasures lie within its depths. Huang was the first emperor of China, and he ascended the throne when he was only 13 years old. Immediately afterwards, he began building his mysterious tomb, which was constructed over 38 years by 700,000 workers. The subterranean mausoleum of Emperor Qin was discovered in 1974 by 5 brothers who were guarding the tomb itself. 7,000 terracotta warriors stood guard at the entrance to the burial chamber, protecting their lord for all eternity. At the doorway to the chamber, traps were installed that fired arrows to kill anyone who dared enter. And what do you think? Would you go in despite such threats? When the 5 brothers entered, they began to feel ill, and soon after the excavation, all of them died under mysterious circumstances. In the chamber with the terracotta warriors, a model of 2 rivers of China had been recreated. But it is believed that instead of water, they flowed with liquid mercury, which could kill anyone who stepped in, or at least drive him insane forever. Hermes Trismegistus, the ancient Egyptian moon god, wrote about a mysterious library of knowledge located beneath the paws of the Great Sphinx. Legend says that this library preserved the earliest knowledge of alchemy, astronomy, mathematics, magic, and medicine. To this day, no one has managed to find the Hall of Records, which was rumored to be connected with the burial chambers of the Saqqara Pyramid, where pharaohs took their knowledge into the afterlife. American healer Edgar Cayce, while in a trance, claimed that he had known about the library from a past life when he was a priest in sunken Atlantis. He said that a secret passage led from the Sphinx's right paw to an underground chamber. Despite all attempts to locate this enigmatic hall, no one has yet discovered it. Many archaeologists and researchers continue to try to solve the mystery, and perhaps in the future we shall learn more about it. Among the most ancient and mysterious finds in human history, the Klerksdorp spheres hold a special place. These small, rounded objects with characteristic grooves on their surfaces were discovered by miners in South Africa near the town of Klerksdorp. Their age is astonishing, more than 3 billion years. They appeared long before life arose on the planet, spawning many theories. Outwardly, they look as though artificially made. Perfect shape, parallel lines, symmetrical features. Naturally, this led to hypotheses about extraterrestrial intervention. Scientists, however, undertook thorough study. Analyses showed the spheres consist of hematite, wollastonite, and pyrite. Their structure displays radial fiber distribution from center to edges, indicating a natural mineralogical origin. Even so, many people still believe in their alien creation, and no one can yet say for certain what forces shaped such unusual forms billions of years ago. Sometimes a seemingly accidental discovery unlocks an entire epoch. This happened in 1931 in the very heart of Rome, near the magnificent Circus Maximus. During construction work, laborers unexpectedly encountered an underground structure. Archaeologists who arrived on site were amazed. Before them lay an almost perfectly preserved temple dedicated to one of the most enigmatic ancient gods, Mithras. This temple, a Mithraeum, dates to the 2nd or 3rd century AD. The architecture astonished researchers. 5 parallel halls, 2 massive staircases leading directly to the circus, and many rooms with clear cultic purposes. The entrance on the eastern side led into an atrium where niches contained images of cult figures, Qautes and Qautopates. Beyond were assembly halls whose marble floors and interior elements survived. In the main hall, a semicircular niche once held a statue of Mithras. The most valuable artifact found on site was a bas-relief depicting the bull-slaying scene. Mithras plunges a sword into the animal while symbols of the sun, moon, raven, and other mystical elements surround him. On the left side of the relief continues the rite. The god carries the slain bull on his shoulders. This is not merely a narrative. It is an entire story encoded in stone that helps historians understand how rites were performed in one of the most mysterious religious movements of ancient Rome. Today, the Mithraeum by the Circus Maximus is open to visitors, though entry is by advance reservation only. It is not just a tourist attraction. It is a time capsule preserving the spiritual life of the classical world, and all of it lies literally beneath the feet of modern Romans. Tomb Keva 62, located in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, contains the mummy of Tutankhamun, one of the most famous pharaohs. It was discovered in 1922 by archaeologist Howard Carter beneath the remains of workers' huts from the Ramesside period, which saved it from ancient looting. The tomb comprises 4 rooms filled with myriad objects, though everything lay in disarray because of the conditions of discovery. Thanks to Carter's methodical approach, the recovery process lasted 8 years, during which more than 5,000 items were found, including the celebrated golden mask of Tutankhamun. The tomb is often called unrobbed, but that is not entirely correct. In reality, it was plundered at least twice shortly after burial, and evidence shows that the doors were breached at their upper corners and later resealed. It is estimated that 60% of the jewelry in the so-called treasury was stolen, and the items that remained were hastily packed. This historical and cultural complex in northern Laos includes thousands of stone jars scattered across the Xienghuang Plateau in the highlands. Archaeologists believe that the jars were created between 1,500 and 2,000 years ago by the region's ancient inhabitants, whose culture and way of life remain unknown. Most excavated materials date from 500 to 800 BCE. Anthropologists and archaeologists suggest that the jars may have served as funerary urns or food storage vessels. Local legends speak of a race of giants whose king was a great warrior. After a decisive battle, he ordered the manufacture of thousands of gigantic stone jars to hold great quantities of lao lao, rice liquor, with which he invited his vassals to endless feasts. During excavations, human remains were found in one of the caves atop extensive peat bogs. Some were calcified and others reduced to ash, which also supports the funerary theory. During the Vietnam War, an American bomb damaged one of the caves that locals had used as a shelter. Until recently, Patagotatan was thought to be the largest dinosaur ever to have existed. However, a research team from Argentina's National Council for Scientific and Technical Research made a stunning discovery. Fossils of a gigantic titanosaur, a member of the sauropod family, were found in the Sierra Chata area north of Añelo in Neuquén province. This enormous dinosaur possessed a very long neck and tail, and estimates suggest its length could have reached between 20 and 25 meters, with a mass exceeding 40 tons. Some estimates propose that it could have weighed up to 100 tons. Its legs were column-like, and it lived during the Cretaceous period about 100 million years ago in South America, particularly in the Patagonian part of Argentina. On the basis of the fossils, scientists can distinguish vertebrae and several pelvic bones of the giant. Although the rest of the skeleton has not been found, the discovery provides enough evidence to draw conclusions about the animal's original size. These remains confirm that titanosaurs were probably much larger than previously believed, shattering size records for sauropods. Most of us have a hobby. Sometimes that passion has nothing to do with one's profession, yet on occasion it leads to astonishing discoveries. A 56-year-old Belgian man named Vincent Michel, a physical education teacher who loved exploring abandoned places, proved this in 2016. He traveled to France to inspect one such deserted mine. At first, everything seemed ordinary, but after walking through a long tunnel, he entered an enormous chamber and witnessed a truly fantastic sight: a cemetery of vintage automobiles. Several dozen cars from the 1930s stood in rows, as if frozen in anticipation. Alas, the condition of the finds was pitiful. Almost nothing had survived inside. Nevertheless, the very fact of such a discovery stunned Vincent, and upon returning home, he shared it with the press. Later it emerged that most of the cars had belonged to local residents and were likely hidden after Adolf Hitler opened the Western Front. Trying to save their property from seizure, people drove the vehicles into the mine. Over time, they rusted away and became unusable, and the owners probably perished or forgot about them. Judging by the empty shells, Vincent was not the first to locate the site, yet his story rekindled interest in wartime secrets tucked away underground. Almost 80 years have passed since the end of the Second World War, yet its traces still surface in the most unexpected places. Thus, in December 2016, workers in Augsburg, Germany, unearthed a huge, unexploded bomb from the war right in the city center. The danger was real. Authorities decided to neutralize the device, but that required the evacuation of 54,000 people, almost one-third of the city's population. The operation was scheduled for Christmas and, according to officials, was a kind of gift, an opportunity to celebrate the holiday in safety. From early morning, a mass evacuation began. Roughly 900 police officers were deployed, along with transport to move hospital patients, elderly residents, and clergy. Schools and sports halls served as temporary shelters, while sappers worked in the deserted downtown. Specialists soon reported that the bomb was a so-called blockbuster, weighing 2 tons, one of the most destructive types dropped by the Royal Air Force. Had it exploded, it could have obliterated everything within a radius of 1.5 kilometers. Fortunately, the defusing operation succeeded, and just 2 hours later, the residents were allowed to return home. Sometimes the most incredible discoveries happen right under our noses. literally next to home. Such was the case in 1978 in Los Angeles, where a group of children gathered in the yard of a house to play. This time, they fancied digging in the soil, so armed with little spades, they began to excavate a hole. At some point, the youngsters struck a strange piece of plastic, and a bit later, something far more unexpected. Beneath the layer of earth lay an actual automobile. After exposing a metal body panel, the children rushed to inform their parents. Detectives soon arrived. Continuing the dig, they discovered with amazement an almost new green Ferrari 246 GTS, carefully buried underground. Naturally, the main question arose: how had this expensive sports car ended up beneath a suburban lawn? Police began an investigation, checked the car's numbers, and learned that its owner was a certain Rosento Cruz, who had given the vehicle to his wife for her birthday. The problem was that the automobile had been reported stolen the day after purchase, and the thief had never been caught. Unraveling the mystery took time, but tenacious detectives eventually saw the case through. Then a startling fact emerged: the theft had been staged. Rosento Cruz himself had arranged the robbery to collect insurance money, and he had painstakingly hidden the Ferrari underground, hoping one day to dig it up again. Everything almost worked, were it not for a group of curious children whose innocent play exposed a cunning fraud. In the very heart of Vietnam hides a natural wonder unmatched anywhere on Earth. Sun Joong Cave is the largest in the world by volume. Its interior world is mind-boggling. A total capacity of 38.5 million cubic meters, ceilings up to 250 meters high, and a width of roughly 150 meters. Despite this grandeur, the cave remained unknown to science until quite recently. Local people found the entrance in 1991, but only in 2009 did researchers from the United Kingdom reach the site. What they saw inside left them speechless. Deep within the cave had formed a genuine hidden world with its own microclimate. An ancient subterranean river flows here, enabling a unique ecosystem to develop over millions of years. Owing to the special humidity and warmth, Sun Joong boasts gigantic stalagmites up to 70 meters tall, and clouds gather beneath the roof. Yet the most impressive discovery was a true underground forest. The trees reach 3 meters in height, and among the foliage live hundreds of animal species, from flying foxes to rare birds and insects. Some plant and fungus species found here were previously unknown to science. Vietnamese authorities allow visits to this marvel, but have strictly limited tourist numbers to no more than 500 people per year. Such a measure is essential to preserve the fragile ecosystem of this astonishing place, for before us lies not merely a cave, but an entire world lost in Earth's depths. Simon Mark, a 37-year-old resident of Luton, became famous all over the world after he made an unusual discovery right beneath his car. It all began when he thought his vehicle had rolled onto a flower bed, but when the wheels of his black car became stuck in a strange hole near his house, he called for help from his father, Gerald. After they began clearing away dirt and debris, they realized they were standing at the entrance to a Second World War air raid shelter. Once inside, they understood that Simon's house stood directly on top of this refuge. It soon turned out that it was not just a small chamber, but an entire 2-room bunker. Their 400,000-pound house was in fact built upon an historic site, a meticulously preserved wartime air raid shelter. After the event, Simon and his father searched for information on the internet and learned that many such refugees had been built in the neighborhood. The shelter beneath their home was in excellent condition, and, in Simon's opinion, the previous owners decided to construct it after a German bomb exploded dangerously close to the house, filling them with fear for their safety. The forgotten Franklin expedition was an ill-fated British voyage to the Arctic, led by Captain Sir John Franklin. He set sail in 1845. Franklin was a Royal Navy officer and seasoned explorer who had already taken part in 3 Arctic expeditions, 2 of which he commanded. His 4th and final expedition began when he was 59 years old, with the goal of navigating and charting the last unsurveyed segment of the Northwest Passage. Every member of the expedition, including Franklin and his 128 sailors, perished when their ships became trapped in ice in Victoria Strait, near King William Island in the Canadian Arctic. Fast forward to 1989, and Brian Spensley, the great-grandson of one of the sailors named John Hartnell, set out to find his ancestor's grave. What scientists found inside the coffin astonished the entire world. Approaching Beechy Island off the coast of Nunavut, they found 3 graves containing sailors from the expedition, including Captain Franklin. When they began digging, they discovered that the bodies had not decomposed. They retained their form, skin, hair, teeth, and even eyes. Imagine looking into the face of your great-great-grand-uncle, smiling after 144 years in the grave. This Northern Californian couple can justly consider themselves incredibly lucky, for they found a real treasure. They were walking their dog on their own property in the so-called gold country when they came upon extremely rare gold coins, still in good condition, buried beneath an old tree. 1,427 coins were found, and although their face value is about $27,000, some are so rare that each coin could be worth up to $1 million. Even if the coins had carried no such premium, the find would still have been a genuine gold mine. The treasure most likely belonged to a private collector, perhaps hidden in response to the assassination of Lincoln. All that is known about the couple is that they have lived on the property for several years and prefer to remain anonymous. The Valley of the Whales is a region in Egypt's Fayoum Governorate in the Western Desert that contains important fossils of the ancestors of modern whales. The site was added to the UNESCO World Heritage List in July 2005. These paleontological remains are among the principal proofs of the evolutionary process, showing how animals that once lived on land became marine creatures, turning into the whales of today. The valley is the most important place on Earth for demonstrating this evolutionary transition, displaying many fossils that lived more than 30 million years ago. One of the first fossils encountered at the entrance to Wadi al-Hitan is Dorudon, a small, primitive whale about 5 meters long. This creature lay halfway between its terrestrial forebears and today's whales, although it was fully aquatic. Another notable fossil is Basilosaurus, a gigantic animal up to 20 meters long that lacked the filter plates of modern baleen whales and instead possessed a well-developed jaw with 44 teeth that helped it seize and tear apart its prey. Rob Paulette is a unique sculptor. His distinction lies not so much in the sculptures themselves as in the astounding underground temples carved using only hand tools. Paulette works in the sandstone of New Mexico, gradually hollowing out various chambers and adorning the walls with fanciful organic forms. His latest creation is called the Glowing Caves, a vast complex in which light enters subterranean rooms through apertures he himself cut. Paulette has created many cave sculptures and follows an almost religious process he calls the dance of extraction. He uses this term because his task is to find the most efficient way to carve walls so that they appear beautiful while remaining structurally sound. His cave is only part of the masterpiece he fashions as social art, hoping that his work can foster social change and unite different cultures living amid the beautiful landscapes of New Mexico. Miners in Serbia recently received an unexpected surprise. 3 Roman-era ships buried in the mud of an ancient riverbed had lain underground for at least 13 centuries. The largest is a 15-meter flat-bottomed boat probably built using ancient Roman techniques. The other 2 smaller vessels were hewn from single tree trunks, matching descriptions of pirate craft used by Slavic groups to cross the Danube and raid Roman frontiers. These craft were found near the ancient Roman city of Viminacium, once the capital of the province and a base for the Roman river fleet on the Danube, one of the greatest rivers flowing through what is now Serbia. The 3 ships lay beneath a layer of gravel 15 meters deep, covered by 7 meters of silt and clay, which preserved them well until quarrying destroyed them during excavation. Unfortunately, heavy machinery seriously damaged the vessel by between 35 and 40%. This is the largest underground city in the world. Located in Cappadocia province, Turkey, it reaches a depth of 75 meters. This vast complex consists of a labyrinth of tunnels and chambers covering an area of 445 square kilometers and could house about 20,000 people. It was discovered in the 1960s when a man renovating his home accidentally stumbled upon one of the most amazing archaeological finds in history. After demolishing a wall in his basement, he unexpectedly found a huge gallery leading to an 18-story underground city now called Derinkuyu. The first part of this astonishing city was probably excavated by the Hittites around 1400 BCE. Archaeologists began exploring the structure and managed to reach a depth of 40 meters, although it is believed that its bottom lies as deep as 85 meters. So far, 20 underground levels have been identified, and the city underwent dramatic changes over its history, especially in the Byzantine era, when massive stone doors were added that closed the city from the inside to prevent external invasion. The remains of King Richard III, who died in 1485, were found beneath an open-air car park in the British city of Leicester, inspiring researchers to new studies of this historical figure's life and fate. Investigations conducted by the University of Leicester confirmed that the damaged skeletal remains belonged to the monarch who fell at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485 and whose body had been lost for centuries. Richard III was the last English monarch to die in battle, a fact that has played a significant role in his mythologization. DNA tests established that the discovered skeleton matched a sample of DNA from a distant descendant of Richard III's sister, who lives in London. Geneticist Turi King stated that Michael Ibsen, a London carpenter, shares a rare segment of mitochondrial DNA with the skeleton. This combination of archaeological data and genetic testing confirms that the remains belong to Richard III. In the depths of the forests of Washington state, in a dusty old barn, a treasure trove awaits that will make any car collector's heart beat faster. Inside this modest structure lies a stunning collection of classic American muscle cars from the 1960s and 70s. Each is not just a vehicle, but a work of art. This type earned the nickname muscle cars precisely because of the massive body. Here, we see rare Plymouth GTX, Pontiac GTOs, and an untouched Dodge Challenger. It is indeed an exceptional auto museum because many of these V8-powered beasts were produced in limited numbers. After proper restoration, they can definitely find the right buyers. In Japan, a car is by no means a luxury, but a means of transportation, which is why garages for old cars are not usually built here. They are simply left outdoors somewhere in the countryside. Sometimes one can find models that are treasures for certain automotive enthusiasts. Legendary Japanese cars, including rare Nissan Skylines and Toyota Supras, which still have plenty of fans worldwide, end up among abandoned vehicles due to strict ownership laws. Yes, scrapping a car in Japan is an expensive endeavor. so many owners simply abandon their iron steeds at junkyards. Although their parts are likely to be a costly rarity on the auto market, or the cars themselves may be valued as real treasures for collectors, these engineering masterpieces face a grim future. They will become scrap metal, never having received restoration. In a field in rural Kazakhstan, a car was dug up. The very Moskvich 412 loved by Soviet motorists that our grandfathers and great-grandfathers drove. The perfectly preserved specimen from the 1980s had, for some reason, been completely buried underground. At last, when the Soviet vehicle emerged from its earthen garage, it proved quite intact, though it had lost its paint. All original parts remained whole and, unbelievably, the tires were still capable of holding air. The interior, of course, had been subject to decay, but the car was sturdy enough not to fall apart when it was extracted from its underground parking place. The Konstantinovka coal quarry in the Kirovohrad region of Ukraine is also known as the graveyard of excavators. It is located in a remote backcountry, but in 1987 it was the youngest coal strip mine extracting brown coal of grade B for thermal power plants. In 2010 it was closed, and on the territory remained open pit equipment that slowly disappears in rising groundwater. Among the involuntary exhibits is a 16-bucket rotary excavator weighing 4,100 tons and 30 meters high. Once this machine mined more than 1 million tons of coal a year, until the tragic fate of industrial giants turned them into scrap metal. Wandering through an empty field in pitch darkness, this guy suddenly encountered an apocalyptic sight. He saw a colossal mining excavator looming in the dark like a mass. This now abandoned industrial monster reaches 30 meters in height and 120 meters in length, with its enormous frame weighing an incredible 1,980 tons. Despite spending years in abandonment and being noticeably corroded, the gigantic machine still retains most of its original switches, controls, and mechanical parts, creating a scene that looks as if it came straight off the set of a disaster film. On a quiet Japanese beach in Hamamatsu, a mysterious iron sphere appeared, leaving both local residents and authorities completely baffled. The perfectly round metal object with two enigmatic handles gave rise to various absurd and scientific theories, ranging from spy devices to dragon eggs. Bomb disposal experts performed an X-ray analysis, while experts stated that it might be a simple mooring buoy. Its sudden appearance and unknown origin turned an ordinary object into an international mystery, showing how easily a world media sensation can be made. If you know exactly what it was, feel free to write in the comments. The authors of this video found in the thickets of an abandoned airfield a forgotten graveyard of Soviet-era aircraft. Here, a kind of aero museum is gathered. We can recognize the disassembled remains of various planes, including the legendary An-2, a Soviet single-engine biplane designed in 1947, as well as the Yak-52 and Yak-18 training aircraft for student pilots and Mi-2 helicopters. Their bare silent frames could tell more stories about historic flights. But now, this graveyard of former glory is firmly conquered by vegetation. In the heart of Kazakhstan lies one of the most mysterious places on the planet, the legendary Baikonur Cosmodrome, whose name translates as Rich Valley. And even now, one can stumble upon something truly unusual there. For instance, in a giant hangar stands a huge Soviet super heavy rocket whose height is an impressive 59 meters. It was once one of the most powerful launch vehicles in the world, surpassing all competitors of its time. You can also see the famous space shuttle Buran, a Soviet orbital aircraft and part of the reusable transportation space system that made only one unmanned orbital flight before being forever entombed in this time capsule. In December 1980, in Rendlesham Forest in the English county of Suffolk, there occurred a UFO incident that became the most famous in Britain. The so-called Rendlesham incident involved reports by military personnel of strange lights and a triangular craft with enigmatic hieroglyphs near RAF Woodbridge. The event, witnessed even by high-ranking officials, included multiple observations of unexplained lights that beamed rays to the ground. The incident left impressions so vivid that a sculpture was erected on the spot in its memory, captivating UFO enthusiasts for decades. In the forests of Chernobyl was discovered a truly horrifying sight. Thousands of gas masks piled in huge heaps on the ground. These grim remnants were likely not properly disposed of after the nuclear catastrophe, when during decontamination work it was still very dangerous to be there due to radiation. Although its level has decreased significantly over the decades, these dreadful masks remain silent witnesses of one of the most frightening nuclear accidents in world history. During the pandemic, when trips abroad were postponed for better times, researchers went to the aircraft graveyard in Volchansk, near Kharkiv. The airfield once belonged to the DOSAAF flying school, but after 2017, the airfield territory stopped being guarded. Now, at the site of the bustling training center, a surreal spectacle presents itself. Dozens of abandoned planes scattered across an empty field. More than 30 aircraft, including L-29 jet trainers, a turboprop NN-24, and the versatile An-2, also known as the Maze plane or Anushka, as well as Mi-2 and Mi-8 helicopters, have become defenseless against vandalism. Imagine the shock of Vietnamese farmers who were simply digging their land when they encountered something metallic. What lay buried beneath their property was, contrary to expectations, not a treasure hoard. All this time they had literally been living on a volcano right under their feet in the ground, slept a huge, unexploded bomb weighing more than 1 ton and 2.5 meters long. It lay only 2 meters below the house level and was fully operational. Who knows what could have led to detonation? Military specialists immediately arrived to evacuate the huge munition, and no one and nothing was harmed during the operation. The family remained unharmed despite having lived right above a relic of war for decades, unaware of it. Try arguing now that fate does not protect someone. In 2010, the tomb of Penta Ware was unveiled after it had lain hidden for more than a century. The tomb was first found in 1885, but was reburied by shifting desert sands, and only after more than 100 years could archaeologists open it again. The funerary monument of a high-ranking Egyptian official concealed a secret revealed many years later. While clearing the tomb, archaeologists found several broken vessels, one of which contained a hardened substance inside. Studies showed that it was cheese. This is one of the oldest food products ever found on Earth. The cheese was discovered in a jar, and archaeologists assumed it was a foodstuff, given the method of preservation and the substance's position. Yet, the test results were startling. The cheese contained the dangerous bacterium that causes brucellosis, transmitted from animals to humans through consumption of unpasteurized dairy products. ISIS extremists take pride in destroying ancient shrines and artifacts. They love the activity so much that they post videos on their social media pages so the whole world knows how they obliterate their own heritage. Yet, contrary to their intentions, they accidentally unearthed treasures of antiquity hidden beneath the earth. These objects were found in eastern Mosul, Iraq's second-largest city, in tunnels that the extremists dug under the Nabi Yunus shrine, whose name means Prophet Jonah in Arabic. The artifacts date from the Assyrian period, an important Mesopotamian civilization that lasted from the 21st century BCE to the 7th century CE. They were discovered while ISIS was tunneling, and archaeologists are now convinced that they have been found at a historically significant site. Inside the tunnels were statues and inscriptions left by the Assyrians, providing valuable information about the life and culture of this ancient civilization. These finds also give the Iraqi people a sense of revenge because ISIS completely destroyed the Mosul Museum when it seized the city. Archaeologists discovered 7 pharaonic tombs containing cat mummies. The find was made in the rocky area surrounding the funerary complex of Uzurkaf in the Saqqara necropolis near Cairo. According to the Minister of Antiquities, 100 wooden statues covered in gold leaf were also found, as well as a bronze sculpture depicting the cat goddess Bastet, who was considered a protector against evil and a goddess of fertility. In addition, scarab mummies were found, the first such discovery in the region. In ancient Egypt, cats and other pets lived in the homes of the wealthy and were also exported to other countries. Animals played an important role in the worship of the gods, and researchers believe that tens of millions of animals were mummified. A collection of gilded wooden statues of a lion, a cow, and a falcon, as well as scarabs with religious significance, representing the sun, god Ra, was also uncovered. People were mummified to preserve their bodies for the afterlife, while animals were mummified as religious offerings. In addition, wooden sarcophagi in the shapes of snakes and crocodiles and hundreds of amulets dedicated to various gods were found. When you place your foot on an anthill, do you realize that your body rests upon a city-state the size of a human metropolis? This astonishing structure is so complex that it rivals the greatest cities on Earth. Many scientists consider anthills to behave like superorganisms. In this breathtaking documentary, you can see how researchers excavated an abandoned ant colony in Brazil. The excavation lasted several weeks and revealed a gigantic citadel with roads, pathways, and underground gardens. The only human analog to this construction is the Great Wall of China. It is thought that this subterranean megalopolis was home to one of the largest ant colonies in the world. However, the exact reason the ants left remains unknown. Researchers poured 10 tons of concrete into the small surface openings that served as ventilation shafts for the ants to display the intricate tunnel system. It was found that this underground city covers an area of 500 square meters and extends 8 meters down. One can clearly see the high level of organization that these creatures possessed when building their subterranean empire. The network was carefully designed to ensure good ventilation and minimal transport routes. It is no wonder that ants are considered the second most complex social group on Earth, surpassed only by humans. Egyptian and German archaeologists discovered fragments of a gigantic statue of Ramses II, one of the most powerful pharaohs of the 19th dynasty, in a muddy pit in Cairo, Egypt's capital. The discovery occurred in the working-class district of Mataraya, and soon the extraction of the pharaoh's statue fragments, more than 3,000 years old, began. The statue is made of quartzite, a hard stone consisting mainly of quartz grains. So far, pieces of the torso, head, crown, and eyes have been retrieved. Despite criticism from Egyptian media, who were concerned that heavy construction machinery might damage the ancient monument, the authorities asserted that such an excavator was used only to lift the head, the heaviest part, while wooden and cork supports protected the other pieces. The statue was found in a courtyard near the ruins of a sun temple built by Ramses II, also known as Ramses the Great. He ruled Egypt for about 68 years, making his reign one of the longest, from 1279 to 1213 BCE. This period marked the height of Egypt's imperial power. The Anglo-Saxon treasure unearthed underground in a field in Staffordshire is regarded as one of the greatest archaeological discoveries on the British Isles. It consists of 1,500 items of gold and silver that experts estimate date to the 7th century CE. The find was made by Terry Herbert, an amateur who searched for treasure with a metal detector. What he found in a friend's field weighs about 5 kilograms and includes military items such as sword hilts and scabbard fittings, along with gold plates inset with gemstones. Before this, the largest known Anglo-Saxon treasure had been the Sutton Hoo hoard, weighing only 1.5 kilograms, discovered in 1939 in Suffolk. Archaeologists working with the treasure were astounded and, to be honest, a little frightened by the finds. Terry Herbert had been searching for such items for 18 years, using a metal detector, and was in complete shock when he unearthed hundreds of gold artifacts. The discovery takes us back to a little-known time in England's history, the era between the fall of the Roman Empire and the height of the Anglo-Saxon age. Now it is time for an unusual subject that shocked scientists. They were found in Asia. This is not merely a grave, but an entire epic buried complex with many bodies. They all lie peacefully, but it is difficult to say whether they were buried alive or simply laid there in that manner. Who were these people, and why were they interred here? We may never know. Write your thoughts in the comments if you have any ideas on the matter. In 2003, a large-scale reconstruction of St. Pancras Station in London began. As part of the work, a nearby cemetery had to be relocated. It was during this process that workers stumbled upon a truly strange burial, which soon made world headlines. Inside one grave, they found a damaged coffin. Alongside human remains lay large bones that defied quick identification. The bones were passed to anthropologists who could not determine their origin and turned to zoologists. These specialists established that the bones belonged to a Pacific walrus, an animal of impressive size, far exceeding normal species parameters. How had a walrus ended up in central London and interred in a coffin with humans? After dating the burial to between 1822 and 1854, it became clear this was no accident. In the same coffin lay the remains of 3 people, one skull showing signs of trepanation, surgical intervention, leading to the theory that it was the result of scientific experiments. All indications pointed to a medical burial. Later, scientists discovered that in 1853, the renowned British biologist Richard Owen had indeed performed a walrus dissection in London. This information supported the hypothesis of a medical origin. Yet why the walrus bones were placed in one coffin with humans remains an open question to this day. Miners often become the first witnesses of archaeological sensations. Such was the case in 2024 when, during coal extraction in North Dakota, workers unexpectedly uncovered a giant mammoth tusk. Operations were halted and archaeologists arrived. The tusk was sent to a laboratory where it was dated to roughly 50,000 years. Suspecting more remains nearby, scientists searched further. And they were right. Soon, over 20 fragments were found beneath the soil: ribs, a tooth, parts of a femur, all belonging to a single mammoth. These animals appeared on Earth about 5 million years ago and died out roughly 5 to 10,000 years ago. They were ancestors of modern elephants, stood 5 to 6 meters tall, and weighed about 11 tons. Despite their size, mammoths were herbivores and lived peacefully. Initially, they inhabited Africa, later spreading across Eurasia and North America. Their extinction is partly linked to the emergence of humans. Hunting, was among the causes of their disappearance. The North Dakota find became a true sensation. According to experts, it is the most complete mammoth skeleton ever discovered in that region. Some scientific projects sound like fiction, yet they nevertheless become reality. In the 1960s, the USSR launched a unique experiment. Soviet geologists decided to drill a borehole that would bring them closer to Earth's core. They chose the Kola Peninsula for this ambitious project because it lies on an ancient, crystalline shield more than 3 billion years old. Work began in 1970. Initially, drilling progressed quickly. In just 9 years, a depth of more than 9.5 kilometers was reached. Then serious problems arose. The drill broke, and the bore walls began to crumble. Despite technical difficulties, drilling continued, and in 1990, geologists attained a depth of 12,262 meters, the deepest point ever created by humans. Even the Mariana Trench is more than 4 kilometers shorter vertically. By 1994, the drilling was finally halted. Extreme temperatures and pressure made further progress impossible. Nonetheless, scientists obtained a wealth of valuable data about Earth's crust composition, the presence of subterranean water, and thermal processes in the planet's interior. Today, the Kola Superdeep Borehole remains a unique site that still inspires admiration and debate. The Paris catacombs are among the most mysterious and eerie places in the French capital. They are strictly guarded, yet even today, truly uncanny things occur in their dark corridors. In 2004, a squad of Paris police responsible for catacomb security set out on a routine inspection of one tunnel leading from Trocadero. At the entrance, they encountered a sign that read, "Building works in progress. Entry forbidden." No repair works had been reported in that area, which immediately aroused suspicion. Ignoring the warning, they continued and, after only a few steps, found themselves in another world. Surveillance cameras and loudspeakers emitting dog barks were installed along the tunnel, but the main enigma awaited at the end. Inside one chamber stood a fully fledged cinema, with a large screen, audience seats, and an adjacent bar stocked with alcohol and provisions. As if that were not enough, this clandestine zone had electricity and even 3 telephone lines. Stunned, the police returned to base to report the discovery. Yet when they came back with reinforcements, the cinema had already been abandoned. The wires were cut, and a sinister inscription on the wall proclaimed, "Do not meddle in our affairs." Finding out who had organized the underground venue proved impossible. According to the police, such secret spots regularly appear in the catacombs, and combating them is no easy task. Even in the 21st century, the catacombs keep their secrets. People have always felt the urge to leave a trace for future generations. Some threw bottles with messages into the ocean, others carved inscriptions on cave walls. In Oklahoma in 1957, they devised a truly original time capsule and placed a car inside it. The city administration of Tulsa decided, why not leave the descendants something genuinely luxurious? The Plymouth Car Company obliged, donating a brand new gold-colored Belvedere coupe equipped with the most advanced technology of the time. The car was sealed in a hermetic vault, along with a national flag, newspapers, a little petrol, and even $100. The prize was to go to the person who could guess Tulsa's population in 2007. Exactly 50 years passed. On the appointed day, a crowd gathered in the square. The capsule was opened, and instead of a gleaming automobile of the future, a rusty heap of metal emerged from the ground. The protective shell had failed against groundwater, and the magnificent Plymouth had become a monument to unfulfilled hopes. The lottery winner was no longer alive, and the prize went to his younger sister. She received the remains of the legendary vehicle, some antique items, and $100 long, eroded by inflation. Nevertheless, the story of Miss Belvedere lives on, a reminder that past and future are always linked, even through a rusty capsule. Modern cities strive upward. Skyscrapers are their symbols. Yet in ancient times, people chose another path and built their settlements beneath the ground. One of the most striking examples of such subterranean architecture is the city of Derinkuyu in Turkey. It was discovered accidentally in 1963, and ever since historians have puzzled over who built this grand underground complex and when. Some data place its construction between the second and the first millennia B.C. Certain scholars are sure it was the work of the Phrygians. Others insist it belonged to the Hittites and was erected around 1900 B.C. Whatever the case, Derinkuyu astounds with its scale. 8 levels, each with its own defense system. Narrow passages, massive doors about 40 centimeters thick and weighing more than half a ton, hidden tunnels. All Kikorks Kriyaishitasori Herit. A genuine labyrinth in which it is easy to bewilder an enemy. The city was designed not only as a refuge but also as a fully fledged place of life. There were residential quarters, granaries, weapon stores, stables, and even temples. It is believed that up to 20,000 people could live in Derinkuyu simultaneously, despite the lower levels lying more than 60 meters deep. The city has a sophisticated ventilation system that still functions. Most astonishing of all, Derinkuyu was linked by a tunnel to another underground city, Kamakli. This shows that ancient inhabitants not only hid from threats, but also created a genuine network of subterranean settlements with an evacuation system. The uniqueness of Derinkuyu continues to impress even the most experienced archaeologists. The next explorers discovered a real architectural wonder forgotten by time. Behind these ruined walls hides a luxurious Italian church built in the 13th century. And despite centuries of neglect, the richly decorated wall details and intricate facades remain surprisingly strong. But the most astonishing item inside the sanctuary is a broken carriage of the same era. A museum exhibition without artificial new repairs and visitors seems far more attractive. Agree? In the depths of a frozen swamp, a group of military historians made a remarkable discovery. They found an entire arsenal of ammunition from the Second World War that had been preserved for decades. The wooden crates they extracted contained thousands of perfectly sealed cartridges that had lain under the ice. This impressive find required careful handling. According to strict protocols, potentially dangerous materials had to remain in the forest so that they could be properly deactivated before being transferred to museums. Imagine that while walking through a forest, you stumble upon something out of The Truman Show. For example, a massive 25-meter wall hidden among the trees and skillfully camouflaged from prying eyes. On the surface of the high walls, trees are painted so that the barrier does not stand out from afar. This huge decorated fence was clearly made to hide its contents from curious tourists. What secret lurks behind it? It could be a military facility, a secret shelter for a politician, or some other secret that even local residents refuse to talk about. On the Pacific coast of the Japanese island of Hokkaido, there is a concrete military bunker that seems to be floating in the air. It is a former pillbox of the Japanese army built in the last days of the Second World War to defend against an American invasion. Its dimensions are approximately 5 meters in width and 6 meters in depth. Because coastal erosion gradually washed away the surrounding soil, the massive structure eventually became exposed and ended up on the very edge of a cliff, creating the surreal illusion that the secret facility is purposefully suspended in the air. In an American forest, the author of this video found a graveyard of military might. He discovered a collection of M60 tanks that once served as the workhorse of the United States Army. The 750 horsepower colossi, capable of developing a speed of 48 kilometers per hour on roads with a range of 480 kilometers, now stand perfectly lined up. Next to them lie 14 disassembled M113 armored personnel carriers that once carried up to 15 passengers each at a speed of 68 kilometers per hour. For decades, they languish in their final resting place, embodying a creepy military museum that nature is slowly taking over. The legendary T-34 tank spent 64 years in a Pskov swamp before it was finally rescued from its watery grave in June 2003. The combat vehicle sank here during intense fighting in the course of the Velikiye Luki offensive operation. The tank was found standing almost vertically, its turret pointing toward the shore. The hull was covered with a thick layer of silt and aquatic plants, and months of technical preparation were required before it could be raised. The heavy machine was lifted from a 6-meter depth of the swamp near the town of Novosokolniki in the Pskov region. Local residents' stories helped reconstruct the tank's history. It accidentally ended up on thin ice when German troops tried to break through the crater, and previous attempts to raise it during the war failed. Despite spending more than 60 years in the swamp, the tank was excellently preserved, was restored to running condition, and received the name Sniper. Today, only a handful of such machines remain. In the crystal-clear waters off the island of Cozumel in the Caribbean Sea lies a captivating fragment of naval history. The minesweeper Felipe Xicotencatl, or simply C-53, served the Mexican Navy and was finally retired in 1999. Named after a general, this 60-meter ship successfully guarded the waters of the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean Sea. At the end of its career, it was intentionally sunk in 2000 to become an artificial reef and a diving attraction. Today, its majestic wreck rests at a depth of 25 meters, and instead of sailors, its rooms are patrolled by schools of tropical fish. Few people know that directly beneath the streets of modern San Francisco rest hundreds of old sailing ships. This amazing story begins with the gold rush of 1849. In January 1848, a carpenter named James Marshall accidentally discovered gold near the Sierra Nevada mountains. Word of the find spread worldwide and forever changed the city's fate. Before that, fewer than 1,000 people lived in San Francisco, mostly indigenous residents. By the end of 1849, the population exceeded 100,000. The influx of fortune seekers was so overwhelming that arriving sailors simply abandoned their vessels in the bay and hurried off to seek gold. Many never achieved success and left, the ships left to rust. Some enterprising residents began using the abandoned vessels as real estate, hauling them ashore and turning them into buildings. Thus, for example, the famous Niantic Hotel appeared. Later, following the devastating fire of 1851, many ships sank. However, crafty townsfolk found a way to profit even from this. Local laws allowed anyone owning a sunken vessel to claim the parcel of land beneath it. Consequently, the bay was filled in and the ships became entombed underground. Today, during the construction of metro lines, car parks, and stations, remains of these craft are still being found. While building the Segway station, for instance, workers discovered the whaling ship Lydia with dozens of bottles of ginger beer in its hold. One metro section even runs directly through the hull of an old 60-meter ship, and most tourists have no idea. The ancient city of Pompeii has long been a symbol of tragedy and, at the same time, an archaeological sensation. In the year 79 AD, an eruption of Vesuvius buried the city in layers of volcanic ash and pyroclastic flows within mere hours. People could not escape, and their lives froze forever in stone. Pompeii was forgotten for almost 1,500 years until 1599, when it was accidentally found during canal construction. Large-scale excavations did not begin until 1748, when it became clear that volcanic ash is a perfect natural preservative capable of keeping objects in astounding condition. Since then, archaeologists have ceaselessly explored Pompeii, and every find becomes a window into the lives of ancient Romans. For example, in 1895, the so-called Bosco Real treasure was discovered in the Villa Pisanella. More than 100 silver vessels, 1,000 gold coins, and a unique cup depicting the triumph of Emperor Tiberius. Among other artifacts is an early Christian chamber with a four-armed cross, a wooden altar, and items used for the Eucharist. This is one of the earliest known Christian prayer spaces. Perhaps the most poignant testimonies of city life are the plaster casts of the victims, with faces, folds of clothing, and hairstyles preserved. They have forever captured the last moments of their owners. At the end of 2024, British scientists made a sensational discovery that so far few people know about. Using the latest radar equipment, they examined the Antarctic ice sheet and accidentally detected, beneath the thickness of ice, a hidden cave inside which lies an entire city carved from ice. The cave is situated at a depth of more than 100 meters, making direct access impossible at present. Research is still being conducted remotely, yet scientists are already preparing a full expedition. Plans include installing special sensors in the cave and gathering data on the structure of the icy city. According to available information, dozens of structures stand in this unusual place, domed with towers, spires, and arches. Some reach 30 meters in height. Most intriguing is that they are arranged in a strict layout. Streets, squares, a clear plan. This resembles a creation of intelligent beings far more than a random act of nature. If the hypothesis is confirmed and the city truly proves to be man-made, scientists will have to find out not only who built it and when, but also why it was hidden beneath Antarctica. This discovery could overturn our understanding of humanity's history and of vanished civilizations. The Second World War left behind not only ruins and scars in the memory of generations, but also countless cultural treasures that were lost. Occupying forces removed everything of value: works of art, relics, precious metals. Church bells, usually cast from bronze and extremely heavy, held special value for the Nazis. In 1940, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring issued a decree to collect metal throughout Germany. Later, the order extended to occupied territories. Everywhere the Wehrmacht appeared, bells were taken from churches. Stopping this was impossible. Parishioners could only watch as their holy objects were carried away. But one Polish priest did not accept this fate. Together with his parishioners, he removed a bronze bell weighing 150 kilograms from the steeple and buried it near the church. For decades, the relic remained hidden from the world, until 2021, when workers laying pipes stumbled upon a strange metal object. When it was unearthed, it became clear they had found that very bell. It now resides in a museum as a symbol of faith, courage, and resistance to tyranny. Its story reminds us of dark times and of how, even in the cruelest years, people tried to preserve what was truly dear to them. On the remote Arctic territories near the settlement of Tiksi on the coast of the Laptov Sea, there is a place called one of the northernmost graveyards of ships in the world. Here, on Brusnev Island, many sea and airborne abandoned vessels rest, forever stuck in the eternal ice. In particular, the Soviet motor ship Tixi, which sank in the Pacific Ocean in 1974, and the motor ship Dnieper, from which a fuel leak was later discovered. On the island shore found their final refuge the old marine steam tugs Sannikov and Begichev, Yukagir, and Leningrad. Besides the ships, there lie the remains of 2 air crashes, the remnants of the fuselage of an Li-2 aeroplane with square windows are clearly visible on the snow. The eternal ice that covers the bay most of the year makes identification difficult, but one thing is obvious: the endless sadness that cloaks these shores. During the construction of a highway through the Chilean Atacama Desert, the workers made an amazing discovery. They found in the sand more than 40 complete whale skeletons. Considering that this place is now one of the driest on Earth, it becomes curious that among these large-scale fossils, paleontologists identified the fin of a blue whale, as well as an extinct creature resembling a dolphin with the features of a walrus. All this was perfectly preserved in the desert sands. Scientists determined that the marine giants died after ingesting toxic algae, and their bodies were later thrown ashore by a powerful storm. All these sad events happened millions of years ago, long before the region changed from a seafloor to a barren desert. After 30 years of hunting for fossilized remains, this researcher literally stumbled upon a gold vein. That is what he called this untouched place, which turned out to be extremely rich in finds. The burials of Megalodon. The lucky man gained an incredible haul of 17 complete teeth of the ancient monster shark in just 1 week, and some specimens hardly required excavation. They were lying on the very surface. The abundance of historical bones scattered all over the site made the search easier. Apparently, in the very distant past, this was a rich fishing ground. Ancient marine predators simply swarmed here, making the territory the dream of any fossil hunter. In the granite rocks of South Africa, researchers discovered an imprint in the stone shaped like a footprint. It is perfectly preserved, but something else amazes. Its dimensions are simply incredible. 120 centimeters from heel to toe. The vertical print in solid granite has spawned fantastic theories that a giant from 7 to 7.5 meters tall once walked across the molten rock, and this could have happened about 200 million years ago. Although sensible geologists identify the formation as natural weathering with erosion patterns resembling toes, could this footprint actually be evidence of the existence of ancient giants? Or is it just another creation of nature, which, as is known, has a very sharp sense of humor? Under a layer of earth, with the help of metal detectors, researchers discovered an ancient chamber sealed with an intricate clay lid decorated with patterns. Inside the mysterious vault lay a whole treasury. For centuries, an impressive collection of gold and silver jewelry, together with antique coins, had rested there. The complex design of the hiding place and the valuable contents suggest that this was not a random storage location, but a deliberately concealed treasure. In all troubled times, people sought ways to protect their wealth. Only, have the better days without upheavals now arrived? I do not know. What do you think? Researchers who ventured into an abandoned slate mine encountered an unusual staircase. It looked surreal. It seemed that the steps descended into crystal-clear depths, but after counting scarcely 10, we realize that the staircase disappears into darkness. Surely the sight will intrigue adventurers. Just try to imagine what lies below and how deep that mysterious staircase goes. What the explorers thought was just another cave system turned out to be the largest underground chamber ever discovered. The scale of the cave truly shocks. Its smooth rock walls and ceiling height exceed 30 meters. It is so vast that even two of the brightest flashlights in the world could not fully illuminate it, and the bottoms of the underwater pools vanished into the dark. Moreover, the perfect acoustics of the chamber create a huge echo, making this underground marvel respond like an entirely different world that lives its own life in the darkness beneath our feet. Inside ancient rock faces an extraordinary discovery gave scientists a clear understanding of the ingenuity of prehistoric humans. A dwelling carved into solid rock 16,000 years old turned out to be quite comfortable. A whole house with several rooms and a living room that housed a fireplace. All surfaces had been carefully worked using primitive tools, and because this renovation has survived for millennia, we can appreciate the architectural capabilities of our distant ancestors. Far in a dense forest, during a nighttime journey, a tourist discovered a small abandoned chapel. Probably at that moment it seemed eerie to him, but this remarkable religious structure was erected here at the end of the 12th century and served as a place of worship for more than 600 years. Now the wilderness has reclaimed it. Since then, time has destroyed most of the original halls. Indeed, all this desolation creates a mystical feeling that someone is keenly watching you. Off the Swedish coast, divers made an interesting discovery. In the cold waters of the Baltic Sea, the hull of a ship that wrecked here in the 19th century was perfectly preserved. In its holds remained not only 100 bottles of vintage champagne, but also rare clay bottles of that very famous Selters mineral water. This drink was so precious that it was once considered medicine and was served at royal tables. The mineral water producer left its trademarks on the clay bottles, and the batch was made between 1850 and 1867. This allows not only the company to be identified, but also amazement that it is still operating today. Before us lies a direct link between a luxurious cargo from the past and our lives. Along the Delaware River in New Jersey rests a collection of abandoned vessels. It is a graveyard of famous ships with a rich maritime history. The most impressive among these maritime ghosts is the American lightship Barnegat, a 39-meter giant built in 1904 at the Camden Shipyard in New York. The United States Coast Guard used it to guide ships away from dangerous shallows. The lightship gained a second life during the Second World War patrolling coastlines and was decommissioned in 1967 after more than half a century of faithful service. It is one of the few surviving ships of this kind and is even included in a list of 10 important historic heritage objects at risk of disappearing. From the dark depths of the English Channel, the wreck of the MV Tricolor has at last been able to be retrieved. This huge 50,000-ton Norwegian car carrier met an unenviable fate. In 2002, it sank after a collision with nearly 3,000 automobiles on board. The ill-fated vessel became famous for being involved in 3 different collisions within just 2 weeks. It is no wonder that it now lies on its side, off the coast of France at a depth of 30 meters. Salvage teams faced an extraordinary task. They had to lift thousands of cars from their underwater grave, which was accomplished and called one of the most unusual and challenging maritime recoveries in European waters. In the Bay of the Solomon Islands lies a unique cruise liner, the MS World Discoverer, whose final journey ended dramatically. The 7-deck vessel was built in 1975, and the ship had ice-breaking capabilities for polar expeditions. But on the 30th of April 2000, it met its fate when it struck an uncharted reef north of Honiara, the island capital. Under threat of sinking, the captain beached the ship in a quiet bay in Roderick Bay. All passengers were evacuated, but the ship could not be saved. Imagine that you are strolling along a quiet shoreline and suddenly discover a huge abandoned cruise liner drifting only a few meters from the beach. Once magnificent, the enormous 157-meter hotel ship named Enchanted Capri boasted the luxury of 248 rooms that once accommodated 937 passengers and 155 crew members. Now it presents a sad spectacle, having been abandoned after it drifted away from its anchor during a severe storm near Alvarado. What makes this ghost ship truly fascinating is the fact that despite plans to scrap it in 2020, the ship remains almost untouched. On board, all its furniture and lifeboats are still in place. It looks eerie, as though it has not lost hope of sailing again, while its once chic deck slowly succumbs to the merciless forces of nature. Would you expect to meet a whole passenger aeroplane not in the sky, but deep beneath the waves of the Red Sea? This Lockheed Martin TriStar L1011, an American medium and long-haul wide-body jet, distinguished by its recognizable design, 3 engines mounted on the wings and tail, served Royal Jordanian Airlines in the 1980s and later sat abandoned at King Hussein International Airport. In 2019, it was intentionally sunk to create an artificial reef at depths from 15 to 28 meters. Now, the underwater giant has become a magnet for wreck explorers and serves to nurture the marine ecosystem. A kayaker's outing turned into an unusual adventure when he visited a decommissioned military submarine. This once advanced underwater vessel was retired in the 2000s and now lives a strange afterlife, simply drifting on the surface. Rumors claimed that the submarine carried out secret missions and contained technological secrets that the public would never know, yet the government put it up for sale on eBay. Suspicious buyers even appeared who intended to revive the vessel as a tourist attraction, but then a fuss arose about possible improper use. On the shores of the Pielovskoye Reservoir in the Moscow region stands the combat conning tower of the legendary first Soviet nuclear ballistic missile submarine known as K-19. This ill-fated vessel earned the nickname Hiroshima after surviving 3 major accidents, including an averted nuclear catastrophe in 1961. An eponymous feature-length thriller was even filmed about the incident. Now, the submarine's conning tower serves as a powerful memorial created with the participation of a former crew member, Vladimir Romanov. He himself witnessed the story in which 32 brave sailors, saving the world from impending disaster, received doses of radiation. This monument is dedicated to their feat, which kept the world from another world war. During a mushroom-picking trip in a suburb of Moscow, a man found a surreal scene. Imagine the sight of a submarine standing in the middle of a swamp. At first glance, it seemed completely authentic, but upon closer inspection, its dimensions were inferior to the original. In the end, the vessel turned out to be a marketing installation, created by a construction company to attract investors to a new residential complex. It must be said that the trick worked, and the advertising campaign fully paid for itself. In the jungles of British Columbia, tourists found not giant mushrooms, but a remarkable piece of aviation history. A Second World War aeroplane standing on the slope of Radar Hill, none other than a Catalina flying boat amphibian. The American seaplane was widely used during the war as a patrol aircraft. At some unlucky moment, it had to make an emergency landing here, and now its fuselage rests in the forest, remaining untouched ever since. In the western desert of Egypt, in the Al-Wadi al-Jadid region, a group of Polish oil exploration researchers in March 2012 came across a Second World War artifact that was incredibly well preserved. Before them, in the sands under the sun, lay a Curtiss Kitty Hawk fighter, notable for its toothy painting. It had been here since an emergency landing in March 1942 and was identified as a P-40 aircraft from the 260th Squadron of the Royal Air Force that disappeared during a flight with Sergeant Dennis. The last report said that it was seen flying with damaged landing gear. At the crash site, a parachute was found, giving hope that the pilot had survived. But no trace of the body was discovered. Likely, the aviator managed to leave the plane, but perished in the desert trying to find civilization, which was more than 100 kilometers away. On the desolate black plains of southern Iceland, one can see a ghostly sight. There lie the remains of one of the most mass-produced aeroplanes in world aviation history, a Douglas DC-3. Its twisted metal frame against the volcanic landscape looks like a scene from another world. This aeroplane, a symbol of the golden age of aviation, made its last landing here on the 21st of November 1973. Miraculously, during the crash, all 7 crew members survived and were even unharmed. Now the plane attracts photographers from all over the world who long to capture its eerie beauty against the dramatic Icelandic scenery. In the jungles of Southeast Asia, researchers came upon a truly surreal find, a gigantic shield of an old tunnel boring machine, forgotten and overgrown. Its steel ring once cut tunnels through rock and clay, opening routes with new transport arteries. But the project suddenly stopped decades ago. The equipment proved too cumbersome and costly to evacuate, and it was simply abandoned in the forest. Today, this machine looks like an ancient monster, reminding us of grandiose plans that remained under the cloak of the tropical jungle. It is not every day one sees a huge locomotive in a dense forest. Here before us, in the thicket, stands a forgotten giant, a rusty freight engine. How did such a remarkable piece of history end up in oblivion? The railway in the Romanian state was built in 1928, and this impressive machine is a copy made after a Prussian locomotive model. It made its final journey to the German Fehlenberg, where it now rests. In the harsh desert of Alaska stands a monument to failed ambitions, the legendary train to nowhere. Abandoned railway equipment, including 3 locomotives and 19 wagons, has been slowly rusting here since 1913, ever since a powerful storm destroyed the bridge over the river. A locomotive model of the year 1910 is forever stuck 40 kilometers from the town of Nome, never having made a single run on its intended route. During the gold rush, it had been planned to run on a 215-kilometer narrow-gauge railway from Dixon County to the mine to carry gold and equipment. But since the railway company went bankrupt in 1907, the silent sentinels of that greedy era are frozen in time in the middle of the field. In the forests of Maryland, an unusual find was discovered. It could be called a time capsule. They say it is the childhood home of Sylvester Stallone, which became abandoned, yet it preserved evidence of the famous actor's early years. And, next to the estate where Rocky lived in the 1950s, visitors can find a collection of classic cars rusting on the property. Here are rare curiosities. The first Mercedes-Benz S-Class, a unique Mercedes SSK of 1929, a vintage Chevrolet Corvette Stingray, a Chevrolet Camaro convertible, and other automotive relics. This collection could have become a museum if the storage conditions were better, But as it turns into just a dump of old rusty cars in a forgotten backwater. Strange that this house was not restored and sold for huge money. Now, we will dive kilometers under the Swiss mountains to discover a truly strange place. Dozens of classic Volkswagen models ended up buried in an abandoned mine. It was closed more than 40 years ago, and these dusty and rusty, partially dismantled cars were transported through tunnels by a museum owner who cleverly used the spacious mine chambers as free storage for his large collection. It numbers more than 200 vintage cars. The most interesting thing is that the owner painted the ceilings blue to deter insects, but then apparently simply left these treasures here, letting time deal with them. Some cars are tucked so deep in the tunnels that visitors continue to find new exhibits with each visit. We would like to dedicate the rest of this episode to the hidden underground cities, the existence of which you would never believe. Secret cities, tunnels, and shelters where people not only found refuge from external threats, but also lived full lives. In Portland, Oregon, there is a network of underground passages known as the Shanghai Tunnels. They were built in the 19th century and connected the piers on the waterfront with shops, bars, and hotels. Initially, the tunnel system was used to transport goods bypassing city traffic jams, but over time, a gloomy fame was attached to the dark corridors. According to legends, people were kidnapped here for forced labor on ships, the so-called Shanghai hiring. They say that careless bar visitors could be stunned and secretly taken away through underground passages in order to then sell them as cheap labor. Although historians argue about the real scale of these crimes, the local atmosphere and rumors of mysterious ghosts continue to attract lovers of everything mystical. In the gigantic city of Tokyo, which has suffered from heavy rains, typhoons, and even potential tsunamis for many decades, a unique underground structure known as the Floodwater Drainage Room has been created. This world's largest drainage system cost the government a whopping sum, but the result was worth it. Inside, there are 5 giant tanks, each of which is capable of accommodating the Statue of Liberty, and they are connected by 6 kilometers of tunnels. When rivers overflow their banks or heavy downpours hit the capital, excess water is redirected here. Special pumps with enormous power pump water into another river, preventing it from flooding the metropolis. According to engineers, these pumps can empty a standard Olympic pool in just a couple of seconds. Just as Naples is noisy and shimmering with colors on the surface, its dungeons have their own amazing history. The Napoli Sotterranea system is believed to have been founded more than 2,400 years ago. Initially, the ancient Greeks began carving passages, and the Romans subsequently expanded the network to store supplies and water. Over the centuries, some of the tunnels were used for secret trade, where the black market flourished, and during World War II, these underground caves and passages became a shelter for thousands of people. They say that here you can find old toys, dishes, and even medical bottles. Evidence that ordinary families literally lived underground, fleeing from bombing. One of the most famous parts of these dungeons is the so-called Bourbon Tunnel, which once connected the royal residence with military barracks. It is said that even after the official closure of the passages, some local history hunters continued to explore the secret passages, hoping to find treasures from bygone eras. Under the busy streets of Edinburgh, there is a whole layer of history, the so-called vaults, or underground chambers. They were built at the end of the 18th century as warehouses for merchants and craftsmen to store goods and equipment. However, damp and poorly ventilated rooms soon became a refuge for those who had nowhere to go. So these vaults became a shelter for the homeless and a habitat for crime. Over time, the air inside became so heavy and humid that people began to leave the vaults, leaving behind various utensils, from kitchen utensils to children's toys. Interestingly, all this was discovered only at the end of the 20th century, when archaeologists and urban enthusiasts decided to explore the forgotten corridors. Today, some sites are open to the public, although the gloomy atmosphere and ghost stories make many tourists feel a slight chill on their skin. They say that mysterious rustles and footsteps can be heard here, especially in those cells where people lived in complete isolation from sunlight. Sometime in the 70s of the last century in Beijing, fearing a possible war with the Soviet Union, they began to build an underground city called Dixiacheng. This is a complex network of tunnels and halls, which was built by hand by local residents. The depth is about 85 meters, and the total area should have been enough to shelter hundreds of thousands of people in the event of a nuclear attack or massive bombing. According to some reports, the labyrinth, which was nicknamed the Underground Great Wall, had shops, schools, cinemas, and even an ice rink. The entrances were disguised as ordinary buildings and shops, so that the enemy did not even suspect such a large-scale bomb shelter. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, construction was gradually curtailed and many sections fell into disrepair. Today, homeless people live here, and it is rumored that some of the corridors are still guarded, as they may contain strategic supplies and important archives. This vast underground world is a reminder of how far people can go to protect themselves from war. In the northern part of France, in the town of Anne, there is a system of tunnels that date back to the Middle Ages. Initially, they were built as a secret shelter from military attacks. Local residents could hide here during a siege and not be afraid of shelling. But these dungeons gained real popularity during the First World War, when Entente soldiers descended here. On the walls, you can see thousands of graphic images and inscriptions that soldiers left in between battles. Many of the drawings are real works of art, reflecting the emotions and experiences of people who find themselves in the epicenter of the military hell. It is impressive that most of these frescoes have miraculously survived to this day, and, according to historians, now serve as invaluable evidence of the life and everyday life of those times. In some nooks, they find abandoned personal belongings and military equipment. Archaeologists believe that some sections of the tunnels have not yet been fully explored. In the city of Montreal, not only winters are distinguished by a harsh climate, but also the contrasts of the weather are impressive. Sometimes severe frosts, sometimes humid heat. That is why in the 60s of the last century, they began to build an extensive underground infrastructure, which the locals call réseau, from the French word réseau, which means network. Today, this network has tens of kilometers of corridors connecting shopping centers, hotels, office buildings, and metro stations. Life here is almost in full swing, especially in the cold season. There are several thousand shops underground, many cafes and restaurants. There are concert halls and even libraries. According to statistics, hundreds of thousands of people move here every day. Tourists are especially surprised at how convenient. You can go shopping or visit sites all day long without going out in the cold or rain. And although all this was originally created as a way to survive in a harsh climate, Réseau has become something of a separate micro-city with its own atmosphere. In the Andalusian town of Setenil de las Bodegas, houses and cafes seem to be rooted into a giant rock. This place looks as if a huge block of stone has literally covered the streets and buildings. In fact, people built facades and rooms right in the rock massif to protect themselves from the heat in summer and the cold in winter. It is said that the first settlements here arose in prehistoric times when natural caves served as a safe haven for local residents. Today, several thousand people live around. Due to the unusual conditions inside the houses, it is often cool, without any air conditioning, and a unique atmosphere always reigns on the streets. Tourists come here to admire the narrow streets decorated with hanging rock vaults, as well as to taste local wines and tapas, which are served right in underground restaurants. Local legends say that once treasures and secret passages were hidden in the depths of the rocky bowels, but whether this is true, no one knows for sure. In the Czech city of Pilsen, from the 13th to the 19th century, an extensive system of underground passages and rooms was formed. Originally, they were dug under houses to store water, food, and of course the famous beer. Gradually, the warehouses and basements were connected by tunnels, forming a network several tens of kilometers long. Interestingly, in addition to storing supplies, these tunnels also served as a sewer, which was an advanced solution at the time. When part of the system was abandoned, excavations began, during which archaeologists found many medieval artifacts: jugs, utensils, brewing tools. Today, tourists are invited to look into some parts of the dungeon, where you can feel the long history of Bohemian brewing and find out what secrets were hidden under the peaceful streets of this small Czech town. In the heart of the town of Corham, England, there is a striking object called Burlington. It began to be built in the mid-50s of the last century, when the threat of nuclear attacks seemed quite real. It was planned that it would be a secret underground city capable of accommodating several thousand people in the event of an atomic war. Whole kilometers of roads were laid underground, communication centers were equipped, a hospital was deployed, and resources were stored for 3 months. Everything was designed to be completely isolated from radiation, toxic gases, and any military threats. According to rumors, there was even a special branch that directly connected to the London-Bristol railway line so that the British royal family could quickly evacuate. As a result, Burlington was never officially involved, and after the collapse of the USSR, the project was recognized as redundant. However, there is talk that the underground passages have been preserved in good condition and can be activated in an emergency. An accidental find of a local resident in the 63rd year of the last century turned the scientists' idea of underground cities upside down. Dismantling the wall near his house, the man found that a huge space was hidden behind it. As a result, it turned out that he stumbled upon one of the largest underground complexes in the world, called Derinkuyu. This city goes deep into almost 18 levels and was capable of accommodating about 20,000 people along with their animals. The rock-cut rooms are equipped with ventilation shafts, wells, and even massive stone doors that could be closed from the inside to protect themselves from enemies. Archaeologists believe that people created such structures to survive during wars and raids. To date, only a small section of the labyrinth is open to tourists. But this is enough to feel the cold breath of centuries and realize how thoughtful the ancient construction was. The Karizi Kish system is believed to have been built about 2,500 years ago, when trade flourished on the island of Kish and a whole city grew. This underground labyrinth stretches for many kilometers and lies at a depth of up to 16 meters. The main task of Kariz was to collect, filter, and store water. The fact is that the island is very hot, and fresh water here is worth its weight in gold. It is curious that the vaults of the tunnel are lined with fossils and shells, the age of which is more than 100 million years. Excavations have shown that the area was once the seabed, and this is another reminder of how amazing the history of the planet is. Over time, the water supply system became obsolete, and the underground galleries were forgotten. But now, some halls house art galleries, cafes, and even small souvenir shops. Tourists can stroll under the ancient vaults, admiring the prints of fossil creatures on the walls. The former Homestake gold mine in South Dakota has become America's deepest scientific center, called Sanford. There are kilometers of workings underground, where scientists conduct research in the field of elementary particle physics and cosmology. At great depths, the thickness of the rock protects the instruments from cosmic radiation, which is especially important for experiments related to the search for dark matter and the study of neutrinos. It was once the site of the experiment of the famous Raymond Davis, who won the Nobel Prize for his research on solar neutrinos. The spacious rooms are now equipped with laboratories with the latest technology, such as a huge water tank for additional filtering of external noise. Some detectors claim to be so sensitive that they can pick up a lone particle in a colossal background. It's amazing how one of the quietest places on the planet can contribute to solving the greatest mysteries of the universe. The big city of New York is known for its High Park, the High Line, which was built on the site of the former elevated railway. But at the beginning of the 21st century, the Low Line project was conceived, an underground park, which they wanted to create in an abandoned tram terminal in the Manhattan area. Engineers planned to bring sunlight deep through a special system that works on fiber optics and mirrors. Thanks to such an innovative approach, it would be possible to grow plants and even trees in the dungeon. The space was supposed to be turned into a place for walking, recreation, and cultural events, a kind of underground oasis in the heart of the metropolis. Although the project faced financial difficulties and mixed reviews, the idea continued to be promoted in order to breathe new life into the forgotten underground spaces of the city. This initiative is often cited as an example of how urbanists are trying to rethink urban space using the most unexpected locations. On the Mesa Verde Plateau in Colorado, unique dwellings of the Anasazi people have been preserved, built around the 12th and 13th centuries. The most famous of them is the Cliff Palace, a huge complex that seems to be built into a rock niche. Special rooms called kiva were found there, which, according to scientists, were used for religious and ritual purposes. Initially, people settled here for protection from bad weather and hostile tribes. In the carved apartments, ceramics, tools for processing grain, as well as jewelry made of turquoise and feathers were found. According to one version, the Anasazi left these places due to a prolonged drought that deprived them of water sources and crops. The modern Hopi and Zuni tribes consider themselves their descendants and sometimes participate in restoration work and ritual ceremonies. In the heart of the Australian outback, far from civilization and the usual greenery, the unusual city of Coober Pedy is hidden. It is very hot here, and the soil is literally pitted by opal mines. It is said that at the beginning of the 20th century, a boy accidentally found stunningly beautiful stones on the surface of the earth, which was the impetus for the beginning of large-scale mining. But because of the hellish heat, the temperature can rise above 50 degrees Celsius, the locals have learned to build duhots, houses that go underground. In such dwellings, even without air conditioning, a pleasant coolness reigns all year round. Moreover, underground architecture has spread far beyond ordinary dwellings. There are underground shops, museums, bars, and even a church. According to old-timers, they once found huge nuggets of opals just a few meters from their house. Now, the deposits are not so rich, but there are still enough people who want to try their luck. Rumor has it that some miners deliberately do not talk about promising veins in order to leave them for the future, because what if opal shoots in price again? In the town of Nushabad, one day a local resident accidentally stumbled upon the entrance to a huge underground labyrinth when he was just trying to dig a ditch for sewers. It turned out that this is an ancient city, which, presumably, is more than 1,500 years old. According to historical information, underground rooms were cut into the thickness of the ground so that women, children, and the elderly could hide from enemy attacks. The system lies at a depth of about 3 to 20 meters. It has several levels with their own rooms, stairs, air shafts, and even peculiar traps so that the enemy who dares to descend gets confused and cannot find a way out. Archaeologists notice that each family carved out its own room, and over time, it all merged into a single network, somewhat reminiscent of a beehive. Oil lamps were used for lighting, and water was obtained from deep wells. Despite the fact that some of the tunnels have already been explored, scientists do not rule out that the underground city may still harbor many secrets. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is located in Ohio and is known for many rumors about alien technology allegedly hidden there. Especially often appears the so-called Hangar 18, where, according to legends, the wreckage of UFOs and even the bodies of aliens are stored, allegedly found after the Roswell incident in the late 40s of the last century. There is a version that Senator Barry Goldwater once tried to gain access there, but he was resolutely refused, making it clear that the issue was no longer being discussed. Some point out that there is also a network of tunnels near the University of Wright State, but it is allegedly used only for the convenience of moving students between buildings. There is no official confirmation of fantastic stories, but rumors continue to excite the minds of ufologists and conspiracy theorists. Some researchers are even sure that the underground structures at the base go several levels down, hiding secret laboratories there. Whether this is true or not remains unknown. Under the Canadian town of Moose Jaw, there is also a network of underground tunnels. Both historical facts and several controversial legends are associated with them. According to one version, at the beginning of the 20th century, Chinese workers hid in these corridors, fleeing discrimination and high taxes. However, many experts say that not much evidence of this underground life has been found, and some of the stories could be embellished for tourists. Later, in the era of Prohibition in the 20s, the tunnels are said to have been used by bootleggers who distilled alcohol bypassing the authorities. The most striking tale is that the famous gangster Al Capone himself could secretly appear in these corridors to conduct his business, although there is no official evidence here either. Now tours are held in the tunnels where a theatrical production of The Path to Riches and Connection with Chicago is offered. As a result, reality is closely intertwined with myths, making these underground corridors truly attractive to inquisitive travelers. Entrepreneur Robert Vicino created the concept of Vivos underground bunkers, which should save humanity from global disasters. The first complex is located near Barstow in California and is designed for about a couple of hundred people. The local premises are able to withstand nuclear explosions, fires, earthquakes, and hurricanes. Inside, there are supplies of food, water, and medicine for about a year. Vicino plans to build a whole network of such arks in the immediate vicinity of the largest metropolitan areas, so that in the event of a threat, people can quickly get to shelter. It is said that investors even want to collect in one place the genetic material of all the animals and plants existing on the planet in order to start a new life after the apocalypse. However, all this pleasure costs a lot of money, and many criticize the project for the fact that it's rather accessible exclusively to the elite. Despite this, Vicino himself considers his mission sacred and hopes that in the event of a catastrophe, it is his arcs that will allow the revival of civilization. The ancient city of Petra can in many ways be called one of the most impressive wonders on Earth. It originated many centuries ago when the Nabateans are believed to have ruled a vast area of Middle Eastern trade routes. The entrance to Petra lies through a narrow and long gorge called Sik. On its sides there are tall rocks in which carved channels for water supply are still visible. The main pearl here is the so-called treasury, a gigantic facade that seems to be carved right into the pink rocks. Inside is a spacious cave that once served as either a temple or a royal tomb. But that's not all. Behind the treasury hides a whole city with many carved facades and more modest buildings. Rumor has it that up to 30,000 people used to live here, and they had a complex system of water conduits to help cope with the arid climate. This city was forgotten for many centuries until a curious explorer rediscovered it for the West in the early 19th century. In the Mexican city of Guanajuato, active silver mining began in the 16th century. In order to transport the valuable metal to the factories more conveniently, an extensive underground network of tunnels was built. Later, during the years of the struggle for independence, the revolutionaries used these corridors, hiding from Spanish troops and transferring weapons. One of the most unusual and even creepy attractions here is the Museum of Mummies. Its exhibits are naturally mummified bodies found in the local cemetery due to the specific composition of the soil and the peculiarities of the climate. Many tourists admit that the exposition makes an ambiguous impression, but at the same time tells about the traditions and attitude to death in this culture. In addition to the museum, in the dungeons, you can also find street art, souvenir shops, as well as secret corners where, according to rumors, treasures are still hidden. Near Krakow, there is the famous Wieliczka salt mine, where salt mining began in the 13th century. Now it is a grandiose complex, going hundreds of meters underground, and its tunnels and chambers stretch for many tens of kilometers. The most impressive halls are decorated with carved figures, chandeliers, and even entire chapels made of salt crystals. Each hall is like a separate museum pavilion dedicated to the history of salt mining and Polish traditions. Here, you can see underground lakes mirroring the light from salt lamps and taste the crystals if, of course, you decide to lick the walls, although it is not recommended to do this for the sake of preserving the monument and hygiene. Wieliczka is famous for its excellent acoustics, so concerts are sometimes held here or theatrical performances are staged. In addition, since the air is saturated with salt ions, there are wellness areas for breathing therapy. It is said that fresh water used to be stored in separate tanks so that miners could wash off the salt a little during particularly long work shifts. In the heart of the Mexican capital, it has long been planned to erect an innovative building called Earth Scraper, which can be translated as Earth Scraper. According to the project, it should be an inverted pyramid, going down several dozen floors and with a large atrium in the middle. The light to the lower levels was planned to be carried through a glass roof, which coincides with the surface of the Zocalo Square, the main square of the city. This idea was proposed by the architects, given that in the historic center of Mexico City, it is impossible to build buildings that are too tall so as not to disturb the views and not spoil the cultural heritage. But the shortage of land is becoming more and more acute, and the way out could just be an inner skyscraper. It was claimed that living quarters, offices, and even exhibition spaces could be located inside. However, the construction has repeatedly faced bureaucratic obstacles. At the same time, the very idea of erecting a building deep into the earth delights many experts and gives hope that in the future, cities will really be able to develop not only upwards, but also deeper. Singapore, known for its severe land shortage, has long looked towards underground construction. One of the most ambitious projects is the Underground Scientific City, which was going to be built on an area of about several 100,000 square meters. It was assumed that thousands of scientists, engineers, and researchers would be able to work there, and laboratories, offices, and even entertainment venues would be equipped underground. The main idea was to use geothermal sources to maintain a comfortable temperature and reduce the load on the city's climate system. In addition, noisy industries can be moved underground to unload the surface from transport and industrial zones. The Singapore authorities emphasize that the city-state has long been looking inland because there are not only underground shops and parking lots, but also water tanks, warehouses, and parts of the subway. If this project is fully implemented, it could be a breakthrough for all megacities suffering from a lack of space. Well, friends, this hour-long episode is coming to an end. If you enjoyed it and want to see the next part, something similar, then write about it in the comments, give us a like, subscribe to the channel, and right now, write the keyword rocket in the comments. This way, I will know that you watched until the very end. Thank you all so much for watching, and next, check out one of the 2 videos that just appeared on your screen.